Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Story Relaxing. Tonight we settle into a world where winter is not a season you decorate for, but something you endure with your whole body. You stand outside a Viking Longhouse as dusk folds itself over the landscape. Snow creaks faintly under your boots. Smoke drifts low and sideways, pressed down by cold air so heavy it feels like it might crack. Inside, people are already preparing to sleep, not because it is late by modern standards, but because daylight has simply run out. This is not Katuga winter. This is survival winter. You probably will not survive this, at least not comfortably, and definitely not without rethinking everything you know about warmth, privacy, and personal space. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights and let yourself step forward as the wooden door opens and warm smoke spills into the frozen air. You duck slightly as you cross the threshold, because the doorway is low on purpose. Heat escapes upward, and Vikings learned early not to give it an easy exit. The door closes behind you with a dull wooden thud, and the outside world vanishes almost completely. The temperature shifts immediately. It is still cold, but no longer sharp. The wind is gone. In its place is a dense lived-in warmth that presses against your face and chest like a thick blanket that smells faintly of ash and animals. Your eyes take a moment to adjust. Firelight flickers along the length of the longhouse, stretching shadows across wooden beams darkened by decades of smoke. This building is long and narrow-shaped, almost like an overturned ship, which is not an accident. One mainstream historical fact most scholars agree on is that Viking longhouses were built to resemble boats, reflecting both their seafaring culture and a practical understanding of structure and airflow. The curved roof helps smoke travel upward and along the ceiling rather than choking everyone immediately. It works, mostly. You step inside further, feeling the packed earth beneath your feet. It is hard, cold and uneven. There is no raised floor, no insulation barrier, just earth that has been walked on, slept on, spilled on and frozen, and thawed countless times. Along both sides of the longhouse are long wooden benches slightly raised, covered with layers of hides, wool, blankets and straw-filled mattresses. This is where people sleep. This is where you will sleep. The hearth runs down the centre of the building like a glowing spine. Flames lick lazily at logs, sending sparks upward into the haze. There is no chimney. Smoke escapes through a vent in the roof or simply seeps out wherever it can. You feel it in your throat almost immediately, a gentle irritation that never quite leaves. Vikings accepted this as the price of warmth. Some archaeologists even suggest their lungs adapted over time, though historians still argue whether chronic smoke inhalation significantly shortened Viking lifespans, or whether the cold and hard labour mattered more. As you move deeper inside, the sounds begin to register. Low voices murmuring, someone coughing, the soft clink of a pot being shifted near the fire. An animal snorts from the far end of the building. Yes, animals. In winter, sheep, goats, and sometimes even cattle are brought inside the longhouse or into an attached section. Not out of sentimentality, but because bodies generate heat. A quirky but well-documented detail is that livestock were essentially part of the heating system. They breathe, they radiate warmth, and that they help keep everyone else alive, even if they also smell terrible and occasionally relieve themselves at deeply inconvenient moments. You notice how crowded it is. Entire families live and sleep here together. Parents, children, grandparents, servants, guests, animals, and you all sharing the same air. Privacy is not a concept anyone expects. If you are hoping for a quiet corner or a personal sleeping nook that hope dissolves quickly, Vikings measured comfort differently. Warmth, food and survival came first, everything else was optional. You pause near the bench that will be yours tonight. Someone gestures casually, not ceremoniously. This is where you go. There is no formal bedding ritual. You do not change into night clothes. You simply prepare to lie down in what you're already wearing. Most people sleep fully dressed, sometimes even with boots nearby or partially on ready for emergencies. One interpretation historians often offer is that constant readiness was part of a worldview shaped by raid storms and sudden danger. Night was not a guaranteed safe pause. It was just another stretch of time to endure. The cold lingers in places the fire cannot reach. Your fingers feel it first, your nose, your toes, but there is also heat. It comes in waves, uneven and unpredictable. One side of your body might feel pleasantly warm while the other feels like it is pressing against ice. You will shift often tonight. Everyone does. Sleep here is not the deep, uninterrupted kind modern people chase. It is fragmented, layered and shared with the rhythms of others. As you lower yourself onto the bench, the wood creaks softly beneath the weight of yet another winter night. The furs beneath you are stiff in places, worn smooth in others. They smell of animal fat and smoke a scent that will cling to you long after morning. You pull a heavy wool blanket over yourself, feeling its weight settle in. Wool is scratchy, imperfect, and incredibly effective. Vikings relied on it for nearly everything, and its ability to retain heat even when damp made it indispensable during frozen winters. The fire crackles, someone tosses on another log, sparks rise and vanish into the smoky ceiling. Outside the wind howls, faintly muffled now by thick turf walls packed with earth and grass. These walls are another key survival feature. Archaeological evidence shows that turf insulation dramatically reduced heat loss, turning the longhouse into a kind of breathing earthen cocoon. You lie back staring upward, watching shadows drift slowly across the beams. Sleep does not arrive instantly, it rarely does here. Instead, you begin the long process of settling, of letting your body accept the conditions rather than resist them. Your breath slows, your thoughts soften. The longhouse hums with life around you, and this, for now, is safety. The night is only beginning, and so is your education in what it truly meant to sleep through a Viking winter. The longhouse settles around you as if it is breathing. The fire pulses gently, not roaring, just alive enough to keep the cold from winning outright. As your eyes adjust fully now, you begin to understand the shape of this place in a deeper way. It is not just a shelter you sleep inside. It is a structure designed to guide heat, smoke, sound, and people into a careful balance that has been refined over generations. The walls slope inward slightly as they rise, built from timber frames packed thick with turf soil and stones. One widely accepted historical understanding is that Viking builders intentionally made walls thick and heavy to slow heat loss, even if it meant darkness and dampness inside. You feel that choice now. The air is heavy still and faintly moist. Moisture gathers in your breath as you exhale, not as visible clouds like outdoors, but as a subtle coolness that never quite leaves your lungs. Above you, the roof curves overhead like the hull of a ship turned upside down. Smoke drifts lazily along it, guided by years of soot that have blackened the wood into something glossy and ancient. Every beam has absorbed countless winters. If wood could remember, this place would hum with stories. A quirky observation from archaeologists is that soot layers in excavated longhouses sometimes help date periods of occupation, each thin layer marking seasons of fire and survival rather than decoration or ritual. You shift slightly on your bench, testing the space. It's narrower than you would choose. Your shoulder brushes another body nearby, warm through layers of woolen skin. No one apologizes. There is nothing unusual about this. Space is shared by default. The longhouse is not built for solitude. It is built for togetherness, whether you want it or not. The benches run the full length of the building, broken occasionally by posts that support the roof. During the day, these same benches serve as workspaces, eating areas and seats for storytelling. At night, they transform into communal beds. Straw mattresses stuffed into rough linen sacks provide a little cushioning, but not much. Over time, bodies compress them into shallow shapes that never fully recover. You can feel the dip where others have slept before you. It is like settling into the memory of someone else's exhaustion. The hearth remains your reference point. Everything orients around it. Heat radiates outward in uneven rings, strongest near the centre, and fading as it reaches the walls. One practical truth historians often emphasise is that Viking longhouses were not evenly warm. Instead, people learned where to sit and sleep depending on weather and status. Those closest to the fire enjoyed relative comfort. Those farther away endured more cold. This hierarchy of warmth mattered. You notice that the benches nearest the fire are already occupied by older adults and very young children. This is not sentimentality, it is survival logic. Infants and elders need heat most. Younger, stronger bodies tolerate the colder edges. There is no discussion about this arrangement. It simply happens. Generations of experience have settled the matter. The floor between the benches is a narrow walkway of packed earth darkened by ashen footprints. It feels solid, but it can freeze hard during the coldest nights. Some longhouses spread straw or rushes on the floor to absorb moisture and provide insulation, though these must be replaced often. Left too long, they rot, smell, and attract insects. Historians still argue whether Viking households regularly changed floor coverings or tolerated them until spring balancing cleanliness against the labour of replacement. You listen again to the sounds around you. A child shifts in distant sleep. Someone mutters softly, half dreaming. An animal shuffles and settles. The wind presses against the outer walls, testing them, but the thick turf absorbs much of its force. Outside, temperatures may plunge far below freezing. Inside, it remains just above the threshold where life stays manageable. That narrow margin is everything. The shape of the longhouse encourages this survival bubble. Long and narrow means less exterior wall surface per person, conserving heat. Low ceilings trap warmth closer to sleeping bodies. Doors are small and often sealed with hides or wooden bars at night. Even the placement of the entrance matters. Many longhouses face away from prevailing winds, reducing drafts and snow build-up. This is architecture born from necessity, not aesthetics. You pull your blanket closer, feeling its weight anchor you. Wool fibres trap air, creating insulation that works even when damp. It is not comfortable by modern standards, but it is reliable. Vikings trusted wool the way you trust central heating. Without it, nights like this would be dangerous rather than merely uncomfortable. Your breath slows further. The smell of smoke fades slightly as your senses adjust, becoming background rather than intrusion. This is something the body learns to do quickly. Adaptation happens not because conditions improve, but because attention shifts. A more debated scholarly idea suggests that Viking tolerance for smoke may have been cultural as much as physical, shaped by growing up in environments where clean air was rare and warmth mattered more. You glance toward the roof vent, barely visible in the dimness. Smoke curls toward it, then hesitates, unsure whether to escape or linger. Weather affects this constantly. On still nights, smoke hangs low. On windy nights, it draws upward more cleanly. Someone near the fire keeps an eye on it, adjusting logs to maintain the balance. Fire management is not a background task, it is ongoing even through sleep. The longhouse creaks softly as wood contracts in the cold. These sounds are familiar to everyone here. They are not signs of danger, they are signs of endurance. The building responds to temperature like a living thing, tightening and relaxing as the night deepens. You realise that sleeping here means surrendering control. You cannot adjust the thermostat. You cannot shut out noise. You cannot choose silence or darkness completely. Instead, you let the longhouse decide the terms and you adapt yourself to them. This surrender is not framed as hardship. It is simply life. As your eyes grow heavy, you sense how this space shapes not just bodies, but minds. Living and sleeping together night after night teaches patience, awareness, and acceptance. There is no escaping each other, so conflict must be managed carefully. Silence becomes a shared agreement rather than a given. Even sleep feels communal. The fire pops softly, sending a brief shower of sparks upward. Someone stirs, feeds it another piece of wood and settles back down without fully waking. The rhythm continues. Warmth, smoke, breath, wood. You sink deeper into the bench, letting the shape of the longhouse hold you in place as winter presses on outside. This is not comfort as you know it. It is something older. Something shaped by cold dark and the long memory of nights like this one. Your awareness keeps drifting back to the fire because everything here does. It is impossible not to measure the room by its glow. The hearth stretches along the centre of the longhouse like a slow river of embers, not a single contained fireplace but a living strip of heat light and responsibility. You feel its presence even with your eyes closed. A gentle warmth brushes your face. A faint sting reaches your lungs. A low crackle anchors your thoughts. This fire is not too decorative. One widely accepted historical fact is that Viking hearths burned almost continuously through winter, sometimes for months at a time, because letting the fire die could mean losing not just warmth, but the ability to relight it quickly in damp conditions. Fire was guarded the way you might guard food or shelter. It was life held in glowing form. You listen as the wood shifts. Logs settle inward, collapsing slightly as embers consume their edges. Each sound carries meaning. A sharp snap means resin burning off. A dull thud means a log has given up its structure. People here know these sounds instinctively. Even in sleep, part of the mind remains tuned to them. If the fire falters, someone will wake. You notice now that no one sleeps deeply all at once. There is always movement. A figure sits up briefly near the hearth, pokes at the embers with a stick, then eases back down. This rotation happens naturally. No schedule is announced. No watch is formally assigned. Over time, households fall into rhythms where light sleepers tend the fire more often, while heavier sleepers benefit without realizing it. Historians still argue whether this fire tending was consciously organized or simply emerged from habit and necessity. Smoke drifts low again tonight. The roof vent must be struggling. Cold air outside presses down, trapping smoke inside like a lid. You feel your throat tighten slightly. Your eyes sting. You turn your face toward your blanket, instinctively seeking cleaner air closer to the bench. This is a common trick. Smoke rises even when trapped, so sleeping lower can help. Children are sometimes placed closer to the floor for this reason, though. That puts them nearer drafts and cold earth. Survival here is always a compromise. The smell of the fire changes as different wood burns. Birch crackles brightly. Pine pops and throws sparks. Oak smoulders slow and steady. A quirky detail uncovered through experimental archaeology is that some Viking households deliberately mixed woods in specific ratios to control burn speed and smoke output. This was not written knowledge. It was learned through long trial and error passed down quietly through generations. You think about how exposed this fire is. No stones around, no barrier, just flame and embers open to the room. By modern standards, it seems dangerous. And it was. Burn scars were common. Clothes caught fire. Sparks landed on bedding. Yet the risk was accepted. Without the fire, winter would kill more surely than flame ever could. The firelight dances across faces nearby, revealing brief details. A lined brow, braided hair, a hand curled loosely around a scrap of wool. Shadows soften everything, making the crowded space feel oddly intimate. Stories are told here before sleep, not loudly, but in low tones that blend with the fire's voice. Tonight someone murmurs something half-remembered. A myth. A family tale. You catch fragments, but not enough to follow fully. That is fine. You're not meant to be alert anymore. Fire also controls time. Without clocks, people read hours by the way flames behave. When embers sink low and glow deep red, it is late. When logs still show yellow tongues of flame, there is more night to go. This internal sense of timing is shared. Someone will wake before the cold creeps too far, not because an alarm rings, but because experience nudges them awake. You shift again, feeling warmth along your front now, cold along your back. The bench is never evenly heated. You learn to roll slowly, bringing chilled areas toward the fire in turn. This small movement repeats throughout the night. No one sleeps still for long. Sleep here is a gentle negotiation between body and environment. Your thoughts wander briefly to the smoke-darkened beams overhead. Some of them are generations old. Layers of soot have sealed the wood, making it resistant to rot and insects. Scholars sometimes note that smoke acted as an unintended preservative, extending the life of longhouse structures. It stung lungs, but it protected homes. Another trade-off accepted without debate. You cough softly once, then again, careful not to disturb anyone. No one reacts. This sound is normal. Everyone coughs. Everyone's eyes water sometimes. Over time, the irritation fades into the background like the sound of wind or the creak of timber. Your body learns what deserves attention and what can be ignored. The fire settles into a steady phase now. Less popping, more glowing. Heat smooths out, becoming less aggressive and more constant. This is the best time for sleep. Your muscles loosen, your jaw unclenches, breath deepens. The longhouse feels momentarily balanced, as if all its competing needs have found a temporary agreement. Outside snow continues to fall, though you cannot see it. You know it from the way the wind quiets and the air inside grows heavier. Thick snowfall insulates the roof, further muting sound and trapping heat. In a strange way, the worst storms can make nights warmer inside. Many have noticed this. Few would phrase it as comfort. You let that thought drift away. The fire holds steady. Someone near it shifts once more, feeds a small log into the embers, then lies back down. The movement is practiced, almost unconscious. This fire has been tended like this for years. It will be tended again tomorrow night and the night after that until winter loosens its grip. Your eyes close fully now. Firelight flickers behind your eyelids, painting slow patterns that fade as sleep deepens. You're not alone. You're not entirely warm, but you are alive, and for a Viking winter night that is enough. You become aware of your body in a new way as you prepare to fully lie down, because now the question is not where you are, but how you feel fit. Sleeping inside a Viking longhouse is not about finding the perfect position. It is about negotiating one that works well enough. You lower yourself onto the bench, careful not to disturb the others already settled nearby. The wood is firm, unyielding, shaped by years of use rather than comfort. Beneath you, layers of straw shift softly inside a linen sack. It offers just enough give to stop the bench from biting into bone, but not enough to forget the hardness underneath. Over that, animal hides overlap unevenly. Some are smooth with age. Others still feel coarse, the memory of the animal lingering in the texture. What excavation evidence makes clear is that bedding here was assembled from whatever was available rather than standardized. Comfort was improvised, seasonal, and rarely ideal. You stretch your legs slightly, then pull them back. Space is limited. Someone's foot rests near your calf. Another person's shoulder presses lightly against your arm. No one reacts. This closeness is expected. It is how warmth is shared. Bodies radiate heat slowly, steadily, and the longhouse depends on this quiet exchange. Modern ideas of personal sleeping space would feel strange here, even wasteful. You pull a fur up toward your chest. It smells strongly now that it's close to your face. Smoke animal, fat, damp wool. These scents blend into something oddly grounding. Many people raised in these environments likely associated this smell with safety and rest. Interpretations vary on whether Vikings actively cleaned bedding during winter months or waited until spring thaw made washing practical. Either way, freshness was not the goal. Insulation was. Your clothing stays on. Tunic trousers, wool socks, perhaps a cloak folded over your torso. Removing layers would only invite cold. Sleep here does not mean vulnerability. It means readiness softened by fatigue. Even children sleep dressed, wrapped tightly, limbs tucked in close. You do the same, curling slightly to conserve heat. It feels instinctive, as if your body already knows this posture. The bench is raised just enough to lift you off the coldest air near the floor. That detail matters. Cold sinks, smoke rises. The sleeping zone lives in the narrow band between. Archaeological layouts show benches placed carefully within this zone, balancing warmth and breathability. It is a narrow margin learned through loss and survival rather than theory. You shift once more, testing your shoulder. The fur beneath you bunches slightly, then settles. Fleas itch faintly at your ankle. You brush the sensation away without fully waking. Small pests are part of life here. An unexpected detail from skeletal remains and historical observation is that people likely built tolerance to constant minor irritation, learning to sleep through discomfort rather than eliminate it. Perfection is not expected. Nearby, someone exhales deeply, settling into sleep. Another turns wood, creaking softly beneath shared weight. The bench holds. It always has. Timber beams beneath were chosen carefully, often from slow-growing trees that resist cracking in cold. The structure supports not just bodies but routine. Night after night, winter after winter, you rest your head on a folded piece of cloth. It is not a pillow in the modern sense. It offers no loft, only separation between skull and wood. Still it is enough. Your neck relaxes, breath evens out. You stop searching for better and accept adequate. Thoughts drift in and out. You think briefly about how long nights must have felt before electric light, before calendars filled with the deadlines. Darkness was not an interruption. It was the dominant state. Sleep stretched and folded around it in fragments. Some scholars question whether people here slept in long continuous blocks at all, or whether rest came in waves shaped by fire tending dreams and shared noise. Your eyelids grow heavier. The fire crackles softly. Smoke thins just enough to stop stinging. The longhouse hums with low living sounds. You feel the bench beneath you solid and patient. This is where you sleep. Not alone, not comfortably, but held in a way that has worked for generations. Winter presses on outside. Inside you let stillness take over, knowing that rest here is not about escape, but about endurance made gentle enough to close your eyes. Sleep does not arrive in silence. You realize that quickly because the longhouse never truly quiets. Instead, it settles into a low-layered soundscape that becomes the background of your rest. Even with your eyes closed, your ears stay gently alert, not out of fear, but out of habit shaped by shared living. The fire speaks first, a soft crackle, a brief pop as sap releases, the faint collapse of embers shifting inward. These sounds are steady and familiar, like breathing. People here can tell how the night is going by listening to the fire alone. When it snaps sharply, fresh wood has been added. When it murmurs low and even, things are under control. Then there are the people. Breathing overlaps in uneven rhythms. One person snores quietly, a sound that rises and falls without pattern. Another exhales in long, careful breaths as if still half awake. Someone murmurs in sleep, a fragment of speech that never becomes words. No one complains. Noise is expected. Silence would feel wrong, even unsettling. Animals contribute their own presence. A goat shifts its weight. A sheep stamps once, then settles again. Somewhere near the far end of the longhouse, a cow releases a deep, contented sigh. These sounds are not distractions, they are reassurance. Livestock inside means warmth, food, and life continuing through winter. A small but telling detail from household remains and suggests animals were positioned strategically, not randomly placed where their body heat helped most without blocking movement or fire access. The wind joins in last. It presses against the turf walls in low pulses, testing seams and thatch. Sometimes it whistles faintly through a gap near the roof. Sometimes it falls quiet altogether, smothered by fresh snow. You can tell when snowfall thickens because the longhouse grows quieter, wrapped in a muffling layer that softens every sound inside. You shift slightly, adjusting your blanket. The bench creaks under shared weight. That sound ripples outward, answered by other small movements as bodies resettle. This happens often. Sleep here is communal, responsive. One person moves, others unconsciously follow like birds shifting on a branch. What evidence consistently shows is that Longhouse life trained people to filter sound rather than eliminate it. Attention learned to rest lightly, responding only to changes that mattered. A sudden shout, a sharp crash, the fire sputtering dangerously low. Everything else fades into texture rather than interruption. Your mind does the same now. At first each noise stands out, a cough, a scrape, a distant howl outside, muffled and far away. Then gradually they blur together. The Longhouse becomes a single living thing humming softly around you. There is a moment when someone near the fire sits up. You hear the shift of weight, the faint clink of a tool touching stone. A log is nudged. Embers brighten briefly, casting moving shadows across the ceiling. No one speaks. No announcement is made. This tending is quiet, practiced, almost unconscious. Discussion continues among researchers about whether these nighttime adjustments were assigned or simply taken up by whoever stirred first. Either way, the system works. Your breathing deepens. Sounds lose their edges. They no longer demand interpretation. They simply exist. This is how rest happens here, not by removing stimulus, but by trusting it. You're surrounded by life, and life has rhythm. Outside, a branch snaps under the weight of snow. Inside, no one reacts. The walls are thick. The night is known. The Longhouse holds steady, full of sound, full of warmth, just barely enough to let you sleep. The smells of the Longhouse deepen as the night settles in, becoming more noticeable once your eyes stay closed long enough for other senses to step forward. Breathing here is not neutral. Every inhale carries history. Smoke first, always smoke drifting down from the ceiling in thin layers that never fully disappear. It is sharp at first, then strangely familiar, like a scent your body stops questioning. Beneath the smoke lies wool. Damp wool dried, wool worn thin and rewarmed again. It smells faintly sweet and earthy, holding traces of lanolin that never quite wash out. Clothing here is not washed often during winter. Water is precious. Freezing temperatures turn washing into a dangerous chore. Most evidence points to garments being aired near the fire, instead letting heat and smoke do what they can. Cleanliness is measured by usefulness, not freshness. Animal scents follow. The hides beneath you still carry traces of the creatures they once belonged to. Fat rubbed into leather to keep it supple releases a heavy, oily smell when warmed. Nearby livestock add their own presence, warm breath, hay. Manure that freezes slightly, then softens again as heat reaches it. This is not pleasant by modern standards, but it is honest. Nothing is hidden. Your own body adds to the mix. Sweat trapped beneath layers of wool cools, slowly releasing a faint salty tang. Everyone smells like themselves here, layered together, until individual edges blur. One interpretation often raised by social historians is that strong communal smells may have reinforced group identity. You smelled like your household. Outsiders smelled different. Scent became another quiet marker of belonging. You adjust your blanket, pulling it closer to your face, and the smoke thickens briefly. Your throat tightens, then relaxes. Coughing happens less now. Your lungs adapt quickly. This adaptation is not harmless, but it is effective. Ongoing discussion remains about long-term respiratory health in such environments, though. Skeletal evidence suggests many lived into older age despite constant smoke exposure. Cold hunger and injury often posed greater threats. The fire shifts again and the smell changes with it. Fresh wood brings a sharper resinous note. Older embers give off something deeper, almost sweet. People here recognize these differences instinctively. Smell is information. It tells you what is burning, how well, and how long it will last. The air feels heavy on your chest, but also protective. Outside, the cold would bite with clean cruelty. Inside the Longhouse, air wraps around you, thick and used, carrying warmth, even as it irritates. You accept the trade without thinking much about it. Everyone does. As sleep deepens, smell becomes less something you notice and more something you float through. It blends with sound, with warmth. with the slow rhythm of breathing around you. The longhouse holds you in its atmosphere, imperfect but sufficient as winter continues to wait outside. You never really undress. That becomes clear as the night deepens and your body settles into its resting shape. Sleep here does not mean shedding layers or stepping out of the day. It means letting exhaustion soften you while you remain wrapped in everything that keeps you alive. Wool stays on your skin, linen stays close. Furs remain draped adjusted only when cold fingers ask for more coverage. Your tunic feels heavier, now warmed by your own body heat and the slow influence of the fire. Wool itches faintly at your neck, a sensation you barely register anymore. People here grow up with this feeling. Clothing is not something you escape at night. It is something you trust. Surviving winter depends on it. What the surviving textiles tell us is that Viking clothing was layered with intention. Fine linen against the skin reduced irritation. Thick wool over it trapped warmth. Cloaks doubled as bedding. This was not fashion. It was engineering shaped by climate. Garments were expected to perform 24 hours a day. You shift, tucking your hands under your arms to warm them. Fingers chill easily when left exposed. Around you, others do the same, curling inward, reducing surface area. Bodies become compact, conserving heat without conscious thought. This posture repeats across the benches like a shared instinct. Boots rest nearby, not far from reach. Sometimes they stay on, especially on the coldest nights. Frozen leather becomes stiff and dangerous to remove. Many choose to loosen boots rather than take them off entirely. A small but telling habit shows up in household finds where footwear is worn thin at the heel, suggesting people slept prepared to move quickly if needed. The air cools slightly as the fire dips and you pull your cloak higher. Sleep here moves in shallow waves. You drift, you surface, you adjust, then drift again. This pattern feels natural, even necessary. Long, uninterrupted sleep is not the goal. Rest is. Interpretations differ when it comes to how Vikings understood sleep itself. Some suggest it was seen as a flexible state rather than a fixed block of time. Night allowed for rest, conversation, fire tending, and dreaming to overlap. The longhouse supports this fluid rhythm. Nothing forces you into stillness. You become dimly aware of your breath brushing warm fabric with each exhale. Moisture gathers, then fades. Wool absorbs it quietly, continuing to insulate. This is why wool mattered so much. Unlike many materials, it keeps warmth even when damp. That knowledge was earned through survival, not theory. The night presses on. Cold seeps closer to the walls, but your layers hold. You do not feel cozy. You feel steady, supported by cloth, by habit, by shared understanding. Clothing here is a shelter that moves with you, and as sleep deepens, you let it do its work. The cold does not arrive all at once, you notice that slowly in the way your toes cool first, then your knees, then the small of your back where the bench meets air that never quite warms. This is not the kind of cold that attacks. It waits. It settles. It reminds you that winter here is patient and very confident. At first, the fire holds its ground. Heat reaches you in uneven pulses, rising and falling with the movement of embers. But as hours pass and the night deepens, the balance shifts. Warmth retreats toward the centre of the longhouse. The edges grow quieter and colder. You feel it as a gradual tightening, like the world asking you to stay still. What the physical remains of longhouses reveal is that winter survival depended less on eliminating cold and more on managing it. Complete warmth was never realistic. Instead, people learned where cold would collect and how to live alongside it. The longhouse is built with this expectation. Benches hug the walls, but not too closely. Roofs slope low, but not enough to drip condensation constantly. Every choice is a compromise. You pull your legs closer, curling slightly more than before. This posture is not about comfort. It's about efficiency. Tucked limbs lose less heat. You notice others doing the same, bodies drawing inward, as if guided by the same unspoken rule. No one announces it. No one teaches it explicitly. It is learned by living through nights like this. The cold has texture. It feels different near the floor, heavier, more persistent. It creeps upward in slow layers. Near the fire it thins but never disappears. Even faces closest to the hearth grow cool once the flames settle into embers. Winter does not respect proximity for long. A practical detail often overlooked is how people adjusted bedding as temperatures changed through the night. Furs were shifted, cloaks doubled, straw was fluffed to trap more air. These small actions happened half asleep, guided by touch rather than thought. You find yourself doing the same, pulling a hide tighter, pressing your feet against warmer fabric. Some researchers point out that Viking winters trained the body to read cold as information rather than emergency. Cold meant adjust, move closer, share heat, add layers. Panic wasted energy, calm conserved it. You feel this lesson settling into you now as resistance fades and adaptation takes over. The cold also shapes time. Hours feel longer when warmth is scarce. You drift in and out of shallow sleep, waking briefly to reposition, then sinking back down. Dreams come lightly fragile and quick to dissolve. The Longhouse never lets you forget where you are. Each stir reminds you that night is active, not paused. Nearby, someone shifts and exhales sharply, disturbed by a chill reaching their side. Another person inches closer, bodies aligning like puzzle pieces, seeking fewer gaps. This is not intimacy in the romantic sense. It is cooperation at its most basic. Heat is shared because it must be. There is ongoing discussion among historians about how well Viking longhouses retained heat during extreme cold spells. Some argue that interior temperatures could remain surprisingly stable when fires were well managed and snow insulated the roof. Others suggest that even indoors temperatures often hovered just above freezing. Either way, survival depended on behaviour as much as architecture. Your face feels cool now, nose and cheeks exposed. You pull fabric higher, leaving just enough room to breathe. Warm air pulls beneath the blanket, creating a small personal climate. It is not luxurious, but it works. You focus on this pocket of warmth, letting the rest of the world fade. The fire shifts again, embers glowing deeper red. Someone near the hearth stirs faintly, but does not rise. The cold is not yet urgent enough. It waits as it always does, testing patience rather than strength. You realise that this creeping cold is not an enemy to be defeated, but a presence to be managed. The Longhouse does not banish winter, it negotiates with it. Tonight, you are part of that negotiation, learning its slow language one breath at a time. At some point in the night, you become aware of warmth that does not come from the fire. It is steadier, closer, and strangely comforting. Animals. They are part of the Longhouse now, not tucked away as background detail, but fully present in the shared effort to stay alive through winter. You hear them before you focus on them. A soft shuffle, a slow breath, the faint rustle of hay. Livestock are positioned with care. Sheep and goats cluster toward one end, their bodies pressed close together, releasing heat into the surrounding air. Larger animals like cattle are kept slightly apart, both for safety and practicality. What the layout of excavated longhouses suggests is that these placements were intentional, not improvised. Warmth mattered. So did order. The air near the animals feels different. Warmer, heavier, edged with the smell of hay and breath. You notice that people sleeping closest to them do not complain. They accept the smell, the noise, the occasional movement because the benefit is undeniable. Body heat is precious. Every warm surface counts. You shift again, drawn subtly toward that warmer zone, even if it means sharing space more tightly with others. This happens across the room. Bodies lean, scoot and align themselves where heat gathers naturally. It is not dramatic, it is gradual, like water finding its level. One detail that often surprises modern readers is how normal this arrangement would have felt. Animals were not separate from daily life. They were wealth food tools and warmth all at once. Their presence indoors during winter was practical rather than sentimental. They were assets that needed protection from colds just as much as people did. You hear a goat snort softly, then settle. Its breath comes slow and steady, creating a pocket of warmth that spreads outward. Nearby, someone adjusts a blanket to take advantage of it. No words are exchanged. Everyone understands the logic. There is still disagreement among scholars about how often animals shared the same enclosed space versus adjacent stalls connected to the longhouse. Some evidence points to fully integrated living areas, while other finds suggest partial separation. The truth likely varied by region, wealth, and local custom. What remains clear is that animals were close enough to matter. Their presence changes the sound of the night. Breathing becomes deeper, slower. Hooves shift occasionally against packed earth. These sounds blend with human ones, creating a layered rhythm that feels almost soothing once you stop resisting it. The longhouse becomes a shared organism made up of many warm bodies breathing in loose coordination. The animals add moisture to the air as well. Breath and waste increase humidity, which can feel uncomfortable, but also reduces how sharply cold bites expose skin. The air wraps around you heavy and used but protective. You breathe it in without thinking too much about what it carries. You think briefly about the trust involved. Animals are unpredictable. They kick, they move suddenly. Yet they're accepted here because the alternative is worse. Cold does not negotiate. Animals at least can be managed. As the night deepens, the animals grow quieter. Their warmth remains constant, a slow background heat that does not flicker like fear. This steadiness matters. Fires need tending, bodies do not. You drift closer to sleep again, reassured by this shared warmth. Winter presses against the walls, but inside life clusters together, human and animal alike, turning proximity into survival. As your body sinks deeper into rest, your attention drifts down to what lies between you and the wooden bench. Bedding here is not a single object. It is a layered arrangement built from necessity, habit, and whatever materials could be spared. Furs come first. Thick, heavy hides laid hair side up to trap warmth close to the body. Some are soft with age. Others still feel stiff, reminding you that they once belonged to animals that endured winters just as harsh. Beneath the fur straw does quiet work. Packed into linen sacks or tucked loose beneath hides, it creates pockets of air that slow the cold creeping up from the bench. Straw shifts when you move, whispering faintly. Over time it compresses, losing loft, then gets replaced when it becomes too flat or damp to help. What household remnants show clearly is that bedding was constantly adjusted rather than perfected. Comfort here is temporary and always under maintenance. Feathers sometimes appear as well. Goose or duck down saved carefully sewn into smaller cushions or spread thinly where warmth mattered most. These were valuable. Not everyone had access to them. A small but revealing detail from burial finds is that feather bedding appears more often in higher status households, suggesting it was seen as a luxury rather than a necessity. So luxury still viewed in survival first. You feel the unevenness beneath you. One hip rests on thicker fur. Your shoulder finds a thinner patch where straw has shifted away. You make a small adjustment, not fully waking, just enough to redistribute weight. This happens again and again through the night. No one sleeps perfectly still. Bedding invites movement. Then there are the smaller lives sharing this space. Fleas, lice, other insects drawn to warmth and bodies packed close together. You feel a faint itch near your ankle, then another near your wrist. You scratch lightly, careful not to disturb anyone. This is normal. Something that rarely gets mentioned in romantic images of Viking life is how constant these minor irritations were. Cleanliness helped only so much. Proximity made pests inevitable. Evidence from combs found in graves suggests grooming was taken seriously, even if washing was difficult. Fine-toothed combs appear often carefully carved and well-worn. People removed lice manually as part of daily routine. Fleas were harder. Bedding absorbed them. Furs provided hiding places. The goal was not elimination, but tolerance. You pull a fur closer around your legs, trapping warmth, and inevitably whatever else lives within it. This trade-off is understood. Warmth comes first, discomfort is managed quietly. Over time, the body learns to ignore small irritations, filtering them out the way it filters background sound. The smell of the bedding is layered. Animal fat rubbed into hides to keep them flexible releases a faint oily scent when warmed. Feathers hold a dry, dusty smell. Straw smells of last summer of fields long buried under snow. These scents blend with smoke until they form something uniquely domestic. Not pleasant in the modern sense, but familiar. Safe. You think briefly about how often bedding might be replaced. There is no single answer. Some households refresh straw regularly. Others waited until spring when drying was easier. Views differ depending on region and access to materials. Coastal communities with seabirds had more feathers. Inland farms relied more heavily on straw and hides. Adaptation followed landscape. The weight of the fur presses gently into your chest as you breathe. It feels grounding. Heavy blankets here are not about softness. They're about stillness. Weight reduces heat loss and discourages unnecessary movement. You find your breathing slowing, matching the rise and fall of the fur. Nearby someone turns and the straw beneath them rustles softly. A flea jumps. Another scratch follows. No irritation escalates into complaint. Everyone understands this part of the night. Endurance here is quiet. You drift again, half dreaming, half aware. Images flicker briefly, firelight, snow, the slow movement of animals, bedding holds you in place, imperfect but effective. It has done this for countless nights before yours. As the longhouse breathes around you, furs and feathers continue their quiet work, trapping warmth, hosting life, and asking nothing but patience in return. You accept the bargain without thinking, letting sleep deepen where comfort ends and rest begins. Night inside the longhouse stretches without clear edges. You sense this as your awareness drifts in and out, because there is nothing here that marks time cleanly. No bell, no clock, no glowing numbers waiting on a bedside table. Darkness does not arrive in stages. It simply settles and stays. You open your eyes briefly and see almost nothing. Firelight has dimmed to a low reddish glow that barely reaches the benches. Shadows flatten into one another. The roof disappears. Distance loses meaning. This is how night is meant to feel here, thick and undefined. People once measured time by sound, by temperature, by the behaviour of fire. When embers glow steady and deep, it is late. When they brighten, suddenly someone has stirred. When the air cools enough to wake stiff joints, the night is moving on. The remains of hearths and burned wood patterns make it clear that fires were managed with this awareness in mind. Time was sensed, not counted. You notice how your thoughts change without external markers. Memories blur. Plans feel distant and unnecessary. Without light to anchor attention, the mind drifts inward. Sleep becomes less about falling unconscious and more about floating between awareness and rest. This in-between state feels natural here. A small movement near the fire catches your ear. Someone shifts, testing whether embers need feeding. They decide not yet. This decision is instinctive, shaped by countless nights like this one. There is no urgency. Fire still holds. Children sleep deeply now, their breathing soft and steady. Older adults stir more often, adjusting stiff limbs or repositioning blankets. Age changes how the night is experienced. Younger bodies surrender easily. Older ones negotiate. You think briefly about how long nights must have felt in midwinter, when darkness swallowed most of the day. Some interpretations suggest people slept in 2 or more segments, waking naturally between them to tend fires, talk quietly, or simply lie awake. Other readings of household rhythms imply sleep was more fragmented but constant without clear divisions. The picture remains incomplete, shaped by habit rather than rule. The absence of light also alters emotion. Worry fades when there is nothing to act on. Planned wait until morning. Night here is not for solving problems. It is for enduring until warmth and light return. Your breathing slows again. Without time to track, minutes and hours blur together. You stop wondering how long you have slept or how long remains. The question loses relevance. Rest becomes its own measure. Outside, the world continues unseen. Snow piles higher, wind shifts direction. None of it demands your attention now. The longhouse holds you inside a pocket of lived darkness, where time loosens its grip. You drift deeper, letting the night stretch as long as it wants, knowing that eventually, without announcement, morning will find you. At some point, even in sleep, you sense the fire changing. It is not dramatic. There is no sudden cold or burst of light. Instead, the warmth shifts just enough to brush the edge of awareness. This is how fire speaks at night. Quietly, persistently, it asks to be noticed. Someone stirs near the hearth. You do not open your eyes, but you feel the movement ripple through the longhouse. Weight lifts from a bench. Bare feet touch packed earth. A body pauses, listening, judging the fire by sound and heat rather than sight. This kind of judgment becomes second nature. You learn it without realizing night after night. Fire here is never fully unattended. The way hearth remains are distributed along the centre of longhouses shows that maintaining embers was a continuous task, even during sleep hours. Letting the fire go out completely risked losing warmth and light for hours. Restarting it in winter dampness could be difficult, sometimes impossible, without stored embers. The person tending the fire moves slowly, conserving energy. They nudge a log inward. Embers glow brighter for a moment, then settle. A faint shower of sparks rises and disappears into the dark ceiling. Smoke thickens briefly, then finds its way upward again. Balance is restored. You realize that this role shifts naturally among the household. Light sleepers tend the fire more often. Those who wake easily become quiet guardians of warmth. No one announces this responsibility. It emerges through habit. Over time, everyone knows who is likely to rise first when the fire dips too low. There is no resentment in this. Fire tending is understood as shared labour. Everyone benefits. Everyone contributes in some way, even if unconsciously. This kind of cooperation is woven into daily life, reinforced by nights like this when comfort depends on collective awareness. You hear the soft scrape of a tool against stone, then the rustle of wood. The smell of fresh smoke drifts outward sharper than before. Your throat tightens briefly, then relaxes. The fire has been fed. Warmth begins its slow outward push again. The person returns to their place without ceremony. No words are exchanged. No thanks given. This work is not performed for recognition. It is simply done because it must be. You feel the bench shift as weight settles nearby, then stillness returns. Your body responds almost immediately. Muscles loosen, the chill at your knees fades slightly. You do not wake fully, the adjustment slips into the background of sleep, absorbed as part of the night's rhythm. There is still discussion among historians about how households organize nighttime fire management during the harshest winters. Some believe families rotated responsibility deliberately. Others suggest the pattern was informal, shaped by who slept lightly or stayed closest to the hearth. What seems clear is that fires did not survive winter by accident. They were watched even when no one appeared awake. Fire also marks status subtly. Those sleeping nearest the hearth are best positioned to tend it. They enjoy warmth and influence. Others farther away depend on them. This arrangement reflects broader social patterns, where proximity to resources often mirrored social standing. Even in sleep, structure persists. You feel another shift in the night, not from cold this time, but from quiet. The longhouse seems to settle deeper as if reassured. The fire crackles softly steady again, smoke thins, the air warms just enough to ease joints and soften breath. Outside, winter continues its slow work. Snow presses against the roof, ice creeps along the ground, none of it reaches you directly now. The fire stands between you and the worst of it, guarded through habit and shared responsibility. You drift further into sleep, trusting that if warmth fades again, someone will rise. And if that someone is you, your body will know what to do before your mind catches up. Your sleep never fully disconnects from the space around you. Even as dreams begin to form, they are shaped by movement, breath, and the quiet presence of others. Night here does not belong to one person at a time. It is shared, layered, and gently crowded, and your dreaming mind adjusts to that without resistance. Voices drift through your rest in fragments. Someone murmurs a few words, then falls silent again. Another lets out a soft laugh, the kind that escapes before waking thought can stop it. These sounds slide into your dreams rather than pulling you out of them. Images blur with reality. Firelight becomes something else. Shadows turn into shapes that make sense only briefly, then fade. This kind of sleep feels different from what you might know. It is lighter, more responsive. You wake just enough to turn to pull a blanket closer to register a shift in temperature, then sink back down again. Archaeological and anthropological comparisons suggest this pattern of rest was common in pre-modern households, shaped by shared spaces and long nights without artificial light. Deep, uninterrupted sleep was not always the goal. Staying adaptable mattered more. You sense a body move nearby, someone rolls over wood, creaking softly beneath the change in weight. The sound does not startle you. It is familiar now. You adjust in response, creating space where needed, replacing warmth where it drifts away. This quiet negotiation happens all night, a slow choreography learned through repetition rather than instruction. Dreams come and go. Some feel vivid for a moment. Others dissolve as soon as they appear. You dream of movement, of travel, of open spaces briefly warmed by sun. Then the longhouse pulls you back, anchoring you in heat and closeness. Your mind does not fight this. It accepts the rhythm offered. Children dream deeply here. Their breathing stays steady, their bodies warm and heavy with sleep. Adults hover closer to the surface, ready to wake if something changes. This difference is noticed but never remarked upon. It is simply how nights unfold. Age reshapes sleep the same way it reshapes everything else. There is no expectation of silence. Dreams are allowed to leak into the room. A hand twitches. A foot kicks slightly beneath a blanket. A whispered phrase escapes without meaning. No one reacts. These signs of dreaming are understood, not judged. Some researchers have suggested that shared dreaming spaces may have influenced storytelling traditions, with images and fragments from sleep blending into waking tales over time. Others caution against drawing such direct lines. The truth is likely less tidy. Dreams here are personal, but the environment they rise from is communal. You feel warmth return to your legs as someone nearby shifts closer to the fire. The redistribution of heat happens subtly, but your body notices. Muscles relax, breath deepens again. You do not wonder who moved or why. It is enough that warmth found its way back. Your own dreams soften. Images slow. The longhouse hums around you, steady and patient. You're half aware of smoke, of breath, of the distant wind pressing against walls thick with earth. None of it demands interpretation now. Sleep deepens not because the world goes quiet, but because you trust it to continue without you. The night carries on full and alive while your mind drifts wherever it wants to go, knowing it will be gently pulled back whenever it needs to be. Even with your eyes closed, you can feel the presence of the world beyond the walls. Winter presses in quietly, making itself known through subtle changes rather than noise. The air inside grows heavier. The roof creaks faintly as snow settles and resettles. The longhouse does not shut the outside out completely. It filters it, translating storms into sensations you learn to read. Cold outside sharpens the stillness within. When wind picks up, the fire behaves differently, pulling smoke upward more eagerly. When snow falls thick and steady, sound softens and the longhouse feels wrapped, almost insulated by the weight above. People notice these shifts without looking. You notice them now, half asleep, registering changes the way you might register a shift in posture. The walls around you are not simple barriers. Layers of turf, earth and wood absorb sound and temperature unevenly. What remains in excavated structures shows that these walls were repaired, constantly patched. Where draft crept in, thickened. where cold proved stubborn. Winter found weaknesses quickly. People responded just as quickly, adjusting rather than rebuilding. You imagine the world as it is now, snowdrifts forming against the outer walls, darkness stretching unbroken across fields and frozen water. The longhouse becomes a small island of breath and heat in a wide, indifferent landscape. This contrast sharpens awareness. You feel both protected and aware of how thin that protection is. A gust of wind pushes harder against one side of the building. You hear it as a low pressure, not a howl. The turf absorbs the worst of it. Someone stirs briefly, then settles again. No alarm follows. This sound is familiar. It has been heard many nights before. There is a quiet understanding that winter can change quickly. A storm might build without warning. Temperatures might drop further before morning. Because of this, nights are never fully surrendered to sleep. Awareness stays lightly engaged, like a hand resting on a door that might need to open. Some interpretations of settlement patterns suggest longhouses were placed deliberately where natural features offered shelter from prevailing winds. Others point out that necessity often forced people to build wherever land allowed. The picture shifts depending on region and terrain. What remains consistent is adaptation. People learn their landscape intimately, responding to it night after night. You feel the longhouse respond, now settling under the weight of snow. The sound dampens further. Inside, the air grows warmer, held in place by layers above. This is one of the small mercies of winter. Heavy snow can protect as much as it threatens. Your thoughts drift again, pulled between inside and out. You are aware of how far warmth would have to travel to reach you if the walls failed. You're also aware of how well they are holding right now. Trust grows quietly, built on countless nights like this one. The fire crackles softly steady. Breath moves around you in slow rhythms. Outside, winter continues its work, but it feels distant now, translated into gentle pressure and muted sound. The longhouse holds, doing exactly what it was built to do, while you drift deeper into rest, suspended between storm and shelter. As the night wears on, you become more aware of who is sleeping around you, not by sight, but by sound and movement. Every generation shares this space, and the differences reveal themselves quietly. Children breathe deep, and even their bodies slack with unguarded rest. Elders shift more often, joints stiff from cold and years of labour. Somewhere between them, adults hover in mitatsiaita sleep, ready to respond if something changes. Snoring rises and falls in irregular patterns. Some breaths rasp softly, others whistle faintly through noses shaped by cold air and smoke. These sounds overlap without rhythm, forming a kind of background texture rather than interruption. No one expects silence. Silence would feel unnatural here, even unsettling. You notice how the smallest movements ripple outward. When an older person adjusts their legs, the bench creaks. That creak prompts another sleeper to shift. A blanket slides, straw rustles, then stillness returns. This chain reaction happens dozens of times through the night. It is not chaos, it is coordination without planning. Children sometimes wake briefly confused by darkness or a chill, then settle again when a familiar body shifts closer. No soothing words are spoken, touch is enough. A hand rests lightly, warmth reassures. Sleep resumes. These small interactions happen without ceremony, guided by a habit rather than instruction. The presence of elders shapes the night in other ways. They wake earlier. They tend the fire more often. They listen differently. Years spent surviving winters sharpen awareness. When something sounds off, an elder notices first. When it sounds normal, they relax back into rest. What daily life accounts and physical remains suggest is that age carried authority even during rest. Sleeping positions closer to warmth often favoured those who needed it most or who carried social weight. This was not negotiated nightly. It was understood. Respect expressed itself in proximity. There is still room for disagreement about how rigid these arrangements were. Some households likely followed strict patterns. Others adjusted fluidly depending on health, weather, or family size. The evidence allows for variation rather than a single rule. What matters is that sleep here reflects social structure without announcing it. You feel a soft vibration as someone laughs briefly in their sleep. It startles no one. Dreams leak into the room and fade again. Another sleeper mutters a name, then goes quiet. These sounds do not invite curiosity. They are accepted as part of the night's work. Your own body mirrors this pattern. You wait just enough to notice the sound, then let it pass. Awareness lifts, then settles. This gentle cycling feels right. The longhouse supports it, offering just enough safety to rest without encouraging complete surrender. As the hours move on, breathing synchronizes loosely. Snoring deepens, movements slow. Even the elders rest more fully once the fire stabilizes. The longhouse feels heavier, fuller, as if everyone has sunk into it together. You lie there, one body among many, sharing warmth, air, and time. Night does not isolate you. It binds you into a collective rhythm that carries everyone forward, until morning finds its way back inside. Your breathing changes again as the night deepens, not because of a dream or a sound, but because the air itself feels different. It carries weight. Smoke lingers, though thinner than earlier, but still present, settling into the lungs in a way that feels both irritating and familiar. You notice it most when you inhale deeply. A faint tightness. A gentle reminder that warmth here always comes with a cost. Living this close to the fire shapes the body over time. Soot clings to rafters and skin alike. Lungs learn to tolerate what they cannot avoid. Traces left in skeletal remains and settlement debris show just how constant smoke exposure was inside winter homes. This was not an occasional inconvenience. It was part of daily survival, accepted without much comment. You shift slightly, turning your face toward clearer air nearer the bench. Others do the same, unconsciously angling their bodies to breathe a little easier. Children are often placed lower for this reason, closer to the floor where smoke thins even if the cold presses harder. Night after night, people learn these small adjustments, passing them down without explanation. Your chest rises and falls slowly now. Breathing through smoke becomes rhythmic, measured. You do not gasp, you do not panic, you adapt. This quiet acceptance is learned early. Winter does not allow for constant alarm. Energy must be conserved. The fire dims slightly and smoke thins with it. Relief follows, subtle but real. You feel it as ease rather than comfort. The air is never clean, but it is manageable. That difference matters. Some observers suggest that constant smoke may have strengthened resistance to respiratory illness, while others point to signs of chronic irritation and damage. The remains do not offer a single answer. What they do show is that people lived full lives in these conditions, working, raising children, and sleeping through countless smoky nights like this one. You hear a soft cough nearby, then another farther down the bench. No one reacts. Coughing is expected. It does not signal danger. It is simply part of breathing here. The sound fades back into the larger rhythm of the longhouse. Your throat feels dry. You swallow once, then settle again. Moisture from breath and bodies keeps the air from becoming brittle even as smoke roughens it. The balance shifts, constantly shaped by fire weather and how many bodies share the space. A small habit reveals itself as someone nearby pulls a piece of cloth up over their mouth and nose while sleeping. It dulls the smoke, slightly warms each breath. This simple gesture appears in multiple cultures facing similar conditions. It costs nothing and helps just enough to matter. You try it yourself, tucking fabric closer. The air warms with each exhale. Breathing feels easier. You relax into it, letting your body settle deeper. The longhouse continues to breathe around you. Smoke rises, thins, returns. Lungs adjust. Sleep flows in shallow, forgiving waves. This is not clean air. It is lived air shaped by fire and survival, and tonight it carries you gently back toward rest. As the night settles into its deepest stretch, voices soften rather than disappear. Someone near the fire begins to speak quietly, not to announce anything, just to fill the space between wakefulness and sleep. The words come slowly, shaped by firelight and fatigue. A story begins not with a clear opening, but with a remembered fragment that others already know. You listen without fully listening. The tale drifts over you like warmth. Names surface then fade. A journey, a narrow escape. A lesson tucked inside the telling, though no one points to it directly. Stories here are not performances. They are tools. They help the mind loosen its grip on worry and the body settle into rest. Long nights made room for this habit. When darkness stretches on for hours, people find ways to soften it. Storytelling becomes part of the evening rhythm, especially in winter when work ends early and sleep arrives slowly. The remains of Longhouse life suggest these moments mattered as much as meals or fire tending. They knit people together. You notice how the voice keeps its volume low, careful not to wake children fully. Elders listen with eyes closed, knowing the story already, but appreciating its familiar shape. Stories told at night do not need surprise, they need steadiness. A small, almost amusing detail slips in as the speaker misremembers a name, then corrects it with a quiet laugh. No one minds. Accuracy is less important than continuity. Stories shift slightly each time they are told. That is expected. It keeps them alive. Some scholars suggest these nighttime stories helped pass down practical knowledge warnings hidden inside entertainment. Others point out that not every tale needs purpose. Sometimes the point is simply comfort. Both views can sit together without conflict. The fire responds to the sound of voices crackling softly as if listening to. Shadows stretch and pull along the walls. You feel yourself drifting closer to sleep, the story becoming part of your dreaming mind. As the voice trails off, no one signals an ending. Words simply stop. Silence returns gradually, not all at once. The Longhouse breathes again, full and steady. You realise that these stories are not meant to be remembered clearly in the morning. They are meant to ease you through the night, and as sleep deepens, that's exactly what they do. As the last words fade, the Longhouse does not rush into silence. It settles into something softer, a shared pause where thoughts drift toward things unseen. Night here has edges people respect. Darkness carries more than cold. It carries uncertainty, and with it a quiet attention shaped by belief. You feel it in the way people position small objects near their sleeping places. A carved piece of wood tucked into a pouch. A simple charm tied with cord and worn smooth by fingers. These are not decorations. They are reassurances. Little anchors placed where hands might find them in the dark. Belief here does not announce itself loudly. It moves through habit, through what people choose to keep close while they sleep. The Longhouse holds not only bodies, but ideas about what moves through the night when eyes are closed. Firelight keeps some things away. So does community. But small protections feel necessary too. One quietly revealing habit shows up in how people arrange themselves. Feet often point toward the fire. Faces turn inward toward the centre of the room. The doorway is left behind backs rather than watched directly. This orientation is practical for warmth, but it also feels symbolic. The hearth represents safety. The outer world, even when invisible, is treated with caution. Stories told earlier linger in the air, mixing with older ideas passed down through generations. Spirits that wander. Forces that test boundaries. Not every listener believes them literally, but belief does not need certainty to function. It needs repetition. Night after night the same gestures are made, the same objects touched, the same words avoided after dark. You become aware of how careful movement feels now. No one steps over another person while they sleep. Paths through the Longhouse are respected. Disturbance carries weight at night. Waking someone abruptly is avoided unless necessary. Rest is protected not just for health, but because sleep itself feels vulnerable. The fire crackles softly, acting as a barrier as much as a source of heat. Flames push back darkness. Smoke carries scent upward. Light flickers across carved posts and beams that may hold markings you cannot see clearly now. Some of these carvings serve no structural purpose. They exist because someone believed they should. Interpretations differ when it comes to how deeply such beliefs shaped daily behaviour. Some see them as background superstition. Others argue they formed a quiet framework guiding how people moved, slept and shared space. The truth likely shifts from household to household. What matters is that belief here is not abstract. It is lived. You notice a hand nearby, reach out and touch a small object, then relax again. The gesture is brief, almost unconscious. Comfort follows. This is how belief works best. It calms without demanding attention. The night outside remains unseen but not unimagined. Wolves, storms, shadows moving across snow. None of it intrudes directly, yet it exists in thought. The longhouse stands between people and the unknown, reinforced not just by timber and turf but by shared understanding. You feel yourself drawn inward, protected by closeness, warmth and the sense that nothing unexpected will cross the threshold tonight. Belief does not erase fear. It gives it shape and limits. As sleep deepens, again these thoughts soften. The objects near your hand remain where they are. The fire continues its quiet watch. The longhouse holds firm, guarded by wood warmth and the steady presence of those who share the night with you. You become aware, somewhere between sleep and waking, of how little space truly belongs to you. An arm rests close to your side and a knee presses lightly against your calf. Breath brushes your shoulder. None of it feels intrusive anymore. Privacy as you might understand it simply does not exist here, and no one seems to miss it. Life inside the longhouse teaches this early. From childhood onward, bodies are accustomed to sharing space at all hours. There are few moments alone and even fewer expectations of solitude. What everyday household patterns show is that closeness was the default state. Being alone was unusual enough to feel unsettling rather than restful. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb anyone. Even this small movement's considered. There is an unspoken courtesy in how people move at night, learned not through rules but through living together. You do not stretch out fully. You do not sprawl. You contain yourself, shaping your rest around others. The idea of a private sleeping area would feel strange here. Curtains, doors separate rooms are luxuries far beyond reach for most households. Instead, personal boundaries are internal rather than physical. You learn which sounds belong to which person. You learn which movements mean discomfort and which mean nothing at all. Familiarity replaces separation. A small behaviour gives this away. When someone wakes briefly, they do not sit up abruptly. They turn their head first, listening, orienting themselves within the cluster of bodies before moving. This pause prevents collision, disruption and irritation. It is a quiet skill learned over time. There is still debate about whether people ever sought solitude within these spaces, perhaps stepping outside briefly or finding moments alone during the day. The physical layout suggests opportunities were limited, especially in winter. Snow, cold and darkness made retreat impractical. Togetherness was not only social but environmental. You feel how this constant closeness reshapes thought. Embarrassment loses some of its edge. Minor discomforts are tolerated without comment. Everyone knows too much about everyone else for small flaws to matter. Sleep noises, restless movements, even dreams are accepted as part of shared life. The longhouse itself reinforces this. Its open interior leaves little room to hide. Posts support the roof but do not divide the space. Firelight reaches nearly everywhere, even in its dimmest moments. Nothing is truly out of sight. This visibility fosters accountability as much as connection. You notice that no one guards their sleep fiercely. Waking briefly to help someone adjust a blanket or make room is normal. Rest is not treated as an individual possession, but as something maintained collectively. If one person struggles, others shift to compensate. This way of sleeping requires patience. It also builds it. Living so close night after night trains people to soften reactions, to let small irritations pass. Anger wastes energy. Winter does not reward it. As you settle again, you feel how your own sense of self, expands to include the space around you. The warmth you feel is not just yours, it belongs to everyone here. Breath mixes, heat travels, comfort becomes communal. Sleep deepens again, not because you are alone and undisturbed, but because you are surrounded and held in place. Privacy fades into something quieter and steadier, belonging. Morning does not arrive all at once. There is no sharp edge where night ends and day begins. Instead, you sense a slow loosening, as if darkness is gently releasing its grip. Your eyes open briefly, then close again, unsure whether waking is necessary yet. Inside the longhouse, the difference between night and morning is subtle, measured more by temperature and movement than by light. The fire has changed character. Embers glow faintly steady but low. The warmth they give off feels thinner now, spread across too many bodies and too many hours. You notice the cold again at your feet first, creeping in where blankets have shifted during sleep. Your body responds automatically, drawing legs closer, conserving heat until something changes. That something is sound. Not noise exactly, but the beginning of activity. Someone near the hearth sits up and stretches slowly, joints protesting after a long night. Another person coughs deeper and more awake than before. A child stirs, then settles again, clinging to warmth rather than readiness. Light arrives indirectly. A faint greyness appears near the doorway, filtering in through cracks and seams. The roof remains dark, but shadows soften. Shapes separate themselves from one another. You can tell where the benches end and the floor begins without touching them. Daily routines begin without announcement. A log is added to the fire. Flames catch, hesitant at first, then stronger. Smoke thickens briefly, then lifts. Warmth starts its slow outward push again. This is how morning announces itself, through fire. You sit up carefully, feeling stiffness in your back and shoulders. Sleep here restores energy, but it does not pamper the body. Muscles remember the hardness beneath you. Joints complain quietly. You stretch just enough to ease the tightness without disturbing those still resting nearby. Some households began the day early, especially during winter when daylight was scarce and precious. Others lingered, letting the fire build and bodies wake gradually. The record does not point to a single rhythm. It suggests flexibility shaped by weatherwork and the needs of the moment. You hear soft conversation begin near the hearth. Low voices, practical words. Who will tend animals first? What food remains? Whether snow fell heavily overnight. These exchanges feel calm, unhurried. There is no rush. Survival here depends on steady pace rather than speed. Children begin to wake more fully now, drawn by warmth and sound. They sit up, rub eyes, and lean toward familiar bodies. Elders wake earlier, as they often do, already shifting toward the tasks of the day. Their movements carry confidence shaped by repetition. The longhouse feels different in this in-between moment. Not fully awake, not fully at rest. It holds both states at once. Night habits linger even as day routines take shape. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and breathe in. Smoke smells sharper now, fresher. Morning air inside is never clean, but it is alive with possibility. The fire brightens, shadows retreat. Another winter night has passed. You do not feel refreshed in a modern sense. You feel ready. Ready to move to work, to endure another day shaped by cold and cooperation. Sleep here is not an escape from life, it is a pause that returns you to it. As you rise so, stepping carefully onto packed earth, you glance once more at the benches and blankets where others still lie. Night leaves traces behind, warmth, impressions, shared breath. Then it fades, making room for whatever the day will demand. Even after morning has begun to take shape, the cold does not fully retreat. It lingers indoors, especially near the floor, waiting patiently for fire and bodies to push it back again. As you stand now, you feel it creep up through the soles of your feet, reminding you that shelter softens winter, but never erases it. Frost sometimes forms inside overnight, clinging to the edges of walls and posts where breath has condensed and frozen. This is not unusual. The way these houses function makes it almost inevitable during the harshest stretches of winter. Warm air meets cold surfaces, and moisture settles wherever it can. People expect it. They brush it away without comment. You notice the way light catches these thin crystals, making them sparkle briefly before the fire grows stronger. It feels strange to see ice indoors, but it does not cause alarm. This is simply part of the environment. The longhouse is warm enough to survive in, not warm enough to forget where you are. You move slowly, careful with stiff joints. Sleep restores energy, but cold leaves its mark. Fingers feel clumsy at first. Toes ache faintly as warmth returns unevenly. People here start mornings gently for this reason. Sudden movement risks injury. Muscles need time to wake fully. A small habit reveals how people manage this. Hands are held close to the body or extended briefly toward the fire, then withdrawn again. Too much heat too quickly can hurt. Skin numbed by cold needs gradual warmth. You follow this instinctively, learning from those around you without instruction. The air inside still feels heavy with smoke, but now it carries the sharper edge of fresh fire. Wood cracks as it heats. Ice near the walls begins to melt, darkening the earth beneath. Drops fall quietly. The sound is soft, almost calming like distant rain. There is no single agreement among scholars about how often interior frost occurred. Conditions varied. Some winters were drier, some fires burned stronger through the night, some roofs insulated better than others. What remains clear is that people adapted easily to these fluctuations. Cold indoors was expected, not feared. You feel warmth return to your hands now, a tingling sensation that borders on pain before easing. Blood flows back, fingers loosen. You flex them slowly, testing strength. Others around you do the same morning movements mirrored across the room. The longhouse smells different again. Smoke mixes with damp earth and melting frost. It is a scent that marks transition, night loosening its hold, day stepping in carefully. You glance towards the doorway where light has grown stronger. Outside winter still waits. Inside fire pushes back steadily. The cold remains present but manageable. Another day begins not with comfort, but with readiness shaped by countless mornings like this one. By now the day has begun to move, but the memory of night still clings to everything you touch. Routine becomes your anchor. In winter, routine is not about productivity or ambition. It is about steadiness, about giving the mind something predictable to hold on to while the season stretches endlessly forward. You notice how people follow the same sequence without discussion. Fire first. Always fire. Someone feeds it carefully, choosing wood that will burn slow and even rather than bright and fast. The goal is warmth that lasts, not spectacle. Hands move with practiced confidence, knowing exactly how close they can come before heat bites. Water comes next if it can be spared from freezing. Ice is broken if needed. Containers are checked. Nothing is wasted. Morning tasks unfold at a pace that respects cold and stiff bodies. Rushing would only lead to mistakes, and mistakes in winter carry consequences. This is how households function here. Repetition steadies nerves as much as it preserves energy. You feel it working on you already. Each familiar step pushes lingering grogginess aside, replacing it with quiet focus. A small behaviour gives this away. People speak less in the early hours, not because they are unfriendly, but because words crawl warmth. Breath escapes with every sentence. Silence conserves heat. When someone does speak, it is brief and purposeful. You follow suit, keeping movements, economical gestures contained. Children learn this rhythm early. They mirror adults instinctively stepping. Carefully, staying close to warmth, helping in small ways that matter more than they seem. Passing kindling, holding a container steady. These tasks are not framed as chores. They are participation. The longhouse responds to this routine as well. Fire strengthens, smoke lifts more cleanly as vents warm and airflow improves. Frost melts along the walls, darkening patches of earth. The space feels awake now, even if the sun has barely risen outside. Some readings of daily life suggest that this repetition offered psychological comfort during long winters, giving structure to days that might otherwise blur together. Others point out that routine was simply unavoidable. Either way, its effect is tangible. You feel calmer, grounded. The season feels survivable when each day resembles the last in manageable ways. You warm your hands again slowly, letting heat seep back without shocking numb skin. Someone nearby hums quietly, almost unconsciously, a sound too low to interrupt anyone else. It's not a song meant to be heard. It's a sign of ease returning. The animals stir more fully now. They sense morning through sound and movement rather than light. Hay rustles, hooves shift. Breath clouds faintly in cooler air near the floor. Their routines overlap with yours, reinforcing the sense that life here is shared across species bound by the same conditions. You take a moment to sit again, not to rest, but to gather yourself. Winter demands attention. Fatigue accumulates slowly. Routine helps distribute effort evenly across the day rather than exhausting it all at once. There is no single pattern that fits every household, of course. Some mornings are harder, some colder, some interrupted by illness or storms or shortage. But the presence of routine allows for flexibility within limits. It bends without breaking. As the fire settles into a stronger burn, warmth spreads more evenly. You feel it reach your back, easing stiffness you did not realize you were holding. The longhouse hums with low activity, now not chaotic, just alive. You realize that this predictability does not feel dull. It feels protective. Each repeated action reassures you that winter has been faced before and survived, many times. By people who learn that endurance is built from small, reliable steps taken again and again, the night fades further into memory, replaced by the quiet confidence of morning work. Routine carries you forward steady and unremarkable, and that is exactly why it works. As the day settles into its slow winter rhythm, you begin to feel the weight that long darkness places on the mind. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive as despair or panic. It shows up as heaviness. As thoughts that circle familiar paths and take longer to wander somewhere new. The longhouse is brighter now, but the light feels thin, stretched across too many hours of night. Even when the sun climbs above the horizon, it never rises far. Shadows linger, corners stay dim. The world outside remains muted, its colours dulled by snow and low sky. Inside, people feel this change without naming it. Winter exhaustion is not just physical. Bodies adapt to cold and labour, but the mind works differently when darkness dominates. Attention narrows, conversations shorten, people become quieter, not withdrawn, but economical with thought and emotion. You feel it's in yourself now. You are less interested in imagining what comes next and more focused on what needs doing right now. Daily life here depends on recognising this shift and accommodating it. Tasks are broken into manageable pieces. Rest is taken where possible. No one expects constant cheer. Endurance is the goal, not enthusiasm. A small telling habit appears during these months. People sit closer together even during the day, not only for warmth but for reassurance. Physical closeness steadies the mind. A shoulder nearby, a shared bench. These things matter more when days feel short and nights feel endless. Children grow restless more easily, their energy bumping against limited space and light. Adults respond with patience learned through repetition. Games are simple, stories repeat. Familiar routines replace novelty, variety costs energy. Familiarity restores it. Some interpretations of seasonal life suggest that people experienced emotional cycles tied closely to light and weather, much as modern studies describe seasonal shifts in mood. Others caution against projecting contemporary language backward. What remains visible is behaviour. Winter encouraged conservation not just of food and fuel, but of attention and emotion. You notice how your own thoughts soften. Sharp edges blur, concerns lose urgency. The longhouse seems to invite this narrowing of focus, protecting the mind by limiting stimulation. There is less to react to here, and that becomes a kind of relief. Sleep patterns shift in response. People rest more often, not always deeply, but frequently. Short pauses during the day, quiet moments by the fire. Night sleep remains fragmented, but total rest increases. This adjustment helps offset the mental strain of long darkness. You catch yourself staring into the fire longer than necessary, watching embers settle and glow. The motion holds your attention, gently offering something steady to focus on. Many people do this without realizing it. Fire becomes a visual anchor when the world outside feels distant and cold. There is no single explanation for how winter shaped emotional life across all households. Experiences varied with health, food supply, and weather severity. But the shared strategies are clear. Simplicity, closeness, repetition. These are not signs of stagnation. They are tools for endurance. As the day continues, you feel yourself moving more slowly, not from weakness, but from instinct. Energy is precious. Winter rewards those who plan it carefully. The Longhouse supports this quiet economy of mind. It offers limited space, familiar faces, steady warmth. In return, you let go of unnecessary effort. You allow thoughts to drift and settle. Winter does not ask you to be inspired. It asks you to remain. And as the hours pass under low light and shared breath, you find that remaining is enough. As the day carries on, you begin to notice how sleeping arrangements are never accidental. Where you slept last night was not random, and where others chose to rest followed quiet rules that no one needed to explain. The Longhouse may look open and shared, but order lives inside it. You remember your place on the bench. Not the warmest spot, not the coldest either. Somewhere in between. This placement reflects more than chance. It reflects who needs warmth most, who tends the fire, who moves easily at night, and who carries authority without raising their voice. Closer to the hearth, elders and infants usually settle. Their bodies benefit most from steady heat, and their sleep is treated as something to protect. Farther out, younger adults accept cooler air and harder benches. Strength allows them to tolerate it. Responsibility expects it. This arrangement shifts when needed. Illness changes priorities. Injury reshuffles space. A guest might be offered warmth as a sign of respect, but the underlying pattern remains. The Longhouse organises itself quietly, responding to circumstance rather than fixed rules. You notice how no one argues over these places. There is no nightly negotiation. Sleeping spots are inherited through habit. People grow into them over years. Children start near warmth, then drift outward as they age. With time, they learn where they belong without being told. A small detail gives this away. When someone returns late from work or steps outside briefly at night, they do not hesitate when lying back down. They know their place by feel. The bench remembers them. Space opens as expected. Physical remains of longhouses show benches worn unevenly. Deeper impressions near certain areas, smoother wood where bodies rested night after night. These marks speak quietly of routine and hierarchy written into timber rather than words. There is still room for interpretation about how rigid these patterns were. Some households likely followed strict customs. Others adjusted fluidly depending on size and need. The evidence shifts with region and time. What does not change is the presence of structure even in sleep. You feel this structure working on you now. Knowing where you belong eases the mind. You do not scan the room for alternatives. You do not question your place. That certainty allows rest to come more easily. Even disagreements respect this order. Tensions flare by day, but night demands cooperation. No one gains by disturbing sleep. Warmth and rest matter more than pride. As evening approaches, again you sense how the Longhouse prepares for another night. Benches are cleared, bedding shaken and adjusted. Places reassert themselves without discussion. The rhythm resumes. You realize that sleep here is not just recovery, it is participation. By lying where you do, you reinforce the balance that keeps everyone alive through winter. Your rest supports the whole just as the whole supports your rest. As the light fades and the fire grows stronger once more, you return to your place without thinking. The bench accepts you. The pattern holds. Another night waits, familiar and demanding nothing more than your willingness to fit into it. As night gathers again, the longhouse feels closer than it did the night before. Not smaller, but more charged. Hours spent together indoors compress emotions the same way cold compresses breath. By the time darkness returns, everyone is aware of everyone else, even if no one says it aloud. Voices rise more easily now, though still restrained. A comment lands sharper than intended. Someone sighs too loudly. Another shifts their space without asking. These moments are small, but in a place where distance is impossible, they matter. You feel the tension ripple faintly through the room, like a draft slipping through an unseen gap. Winter does this. When work is repetitive, space is shared, and escape is limited, patience thins. The longhouse absorbs these moods along with smoke and heat. It holds them until they either settle or spark. You notice how disagreements rarely erupt into anything dramatic at night. There is too much at stake. Sleep matters, warmth matters. Conflict is managed quietly or postponed until daylight, when movement and labour can burn it off. This restraint is not politeness, it is survival. A small behaviour gives this away. When irritation rises, people turn toward the fire rather than toward each other. Eyes fix on embers. Hands busy themselves with wood or blankets. Focus shifts outward. The moment passes without needing words. The shared space enforces this kind of self-control. There are no walls to slam, no rooms to retreat into. Anger has nowhere to go but inward, where it cools alongside breath. Over time, people learn which battles are worth the energy and which are not. Winter teaches this lesson repeatedly. Traces of longhouse life suggest that social rules were reinforced through proximity rather than punishment. Living so close made consequences immediate. A harsh word lingered in the air. An unresolved dispute made sleep uncomfortable for everyone. Cooperation became the easier path. You feel this pressure yourself. When someone nearby shifts abruptly, you register it, then choose not to react. The choice feels automatic. The night does not reward escalation. That does not mean tension disappears entirely. It simmers quietly like embers beneath ash. Boredom feeds it, fatigue sharpens it. But the same closeness that creates friction also contains it. No one is alone with their anger. It diffuses through shared presence. Laughter helps. Someone makes a dry remark, another responds softly. The mood eases just enough. Humour here is not loud or elaborate. It is brief, perfectly timed, and deeply practical. It reminds everyone that they are enduring the same conditions together. As bedding is arranged and places reclaimed, the longhouse settles again. The earlier edge dulls. Bodies lie down. Breath evens out. Whatever tension existed finds nowhere to stand and slowly dissolves into the larger rhythm of the night. You lie back on your bench, aware of how thin the line is between harmony and strain in a space like this. You also sense how well practiced everyone is at keeping that line intact. Winter demands cooperation more than comfort, and night reinforces that lesson, gently but firmly. As the fire steadies and shadows lengthen once more, the longhouse absorbs the last traces of friction, holding everyone together through another dark stretch, quiet and intact. The longhouse never truly rests, even when everyone inside does. Wood shifts, earth settles. The building itself responds to winter, the same way the bodies do, adjusting constantly to pressure, cold and time. As night deepens again, you hear a faint creak overhead. Not alarming, just the sound of timber tightening in low temperatures. Someone notices, not with urgency but with recognition. A beam like that always complains when the cold sharpens. The sound has been heard before. It means attention, not panic. Repairs do not wait for daylight here. Winter does not pause for convenience. If something loosens, if say weight pulls at the roof, it must be addressed when it happens. Letting small problems grow invites bigger ones, and bigger ones can end nights permanently. You feel movement as a few people rise quietly. They do not speak much. Tools are kept close for this reason. A wedge, a strip of wood, a coil of cord, small things that solve small problems before they become serious. The work is careful and calm. Someone braces a post, another adjusts a beam, slightly easing pressure rather than forcing it. The longhouse answers with a low groan, then settles. Silence returns. This exchange feels almost conversational, as if the building and its people understand each other. What remains visible in surviving structures shows just how often this kind of maintenance happened. Longhouses were not static creations. They were living frameworks adjusted, reinforced and reshaped constantly. Winter accelerated this process. Cold revealed weaknesses quickly. You notice how this work does not fully wake you. It folds into the background of sleep, registered, but not disruptive. This happens because you trust the hands moving in the dark. Everyone does. These are not strangers. They are the same people who share your breath and warmth. A small detail reveals how routine this is. After the adjustment tools return to their place without fuss, no one checks their work twice. Experience has taught what is enough. Overdoing it wastes energy. Underdoing it invites trouble. Balance is everything. There is room for uncertainty about how often such nighttime repairs occurred. Conditions varied. Some winters were mild, some structures stronger than others. But the wear patterns left behind suggest that winter demanded constant attention to the house itself, not just to fire and food. You shift slightly, feeling the bench steady beneath you. Confidence returns. The longhouse feels solid again, its shape holding. Outside, snow continues to gather, pressing gently but insistently. Inside, adjustments have already been made. The people who rose now lie back down, breath evens out. The night resumes its slow rhythm. The interruption fades as if it never happened. You realize that sleeping here means trusting more than walls and roof. It means trusting vigilance, trusting that small problems will be noticed, trusting that others will rise when needed just as you would. As sleep deepens, again the longhouse rests with you, reinforced not just by wood and turf, but by attention given at exactly the right moment. As another night settles into its familiar shape, your thoughts wander outward, comparing this sleep to others you have known, even if only faintly, through stories and imagination. You sense that while every culture finds ways to survive winter, the experience of rest can feel entirely different depending on where and how people live. Here sleep is communal, smoky and shaped by fire. In other places warmth comes from different sources. Stone hearths enclosed in walls, raised beds lifted away from cold floors, separate rooms that promise quiet but isolate bodies from shared heat. Each solution solves one problem while creating another. The way this longhouse functions makes it clear that Vikings chose proximity over privacy. Heat travels best when bodies cluster. Awareness spreads faster when everyone shares the same space. This approach works well in a climate where cold threatens constantly and unpredictably. A detail you might not expect becomes clear as you lie there. You are never truly alone with your thoughts here. Even in dreams, the presence of others shapes rest. That can feel limiting, but it also prevents the kind of isolation that long winters can deepen elsewhere. Companionship here is not optional, it is structural. You imagine how sleep might feel in a stone hall farther south, where walls block wind more effectively, but stone holds cold stubbornly. Or in timber houses where chimneys draw smoke upward cleanly but require constant fuel. Each design reflects local trade-offs, none are perfect. There is more than one way to read these differences. Some might see communal sleep as a hardship endured until better solutions emerged. Others see it as an adaptation perfectly suited to environment and resources. The traces left behind do not argue for one view alone. They show variety shaped by need. Your own body weighs in quietly. Despite the smoke, the noise and the lack of space, you are warm enough. You are rested enough. That matters more than comfort measured by softness or silence. A small observation settles in as you drift. Sleeping this way keeps you tuned to others. You notice changes quickly. You respond without delay. In separate rooms, those signals would be delayed or missed entirely. Here, survival information moves through sound and movement instantly. You feel a subtle appreciation for this arrangement now. Not admiration, understanding. It works, because it has to, Winter selects for what functions, not what flatters. As the fire glows and a breath moves around you, comparisons fade. There is no need to rank this sleep against others. It belongs to this place, this climate, this moment, and within those bounds it does its job. You settle again, letting the longhouse hold you, knowing that while sleep takes many forms across the world tonight, this one is enough. By now, any romantic ideas you might have carried into this night have softened into something more practical. Survival here does not feel heroic, it feels methodical. It unfolds through small choices made correctly over and over again long after novelty has worn away. You lie on the bench and understand this in your body. There is no dramatic struggle, no moment of triumph. There is only the steady work of staying warm enough, resting enough, and waking ready enough to face the next day. That is what endurance looks like here. Quiet, unremarkable, effective. Life in winter rewards those who do not waste energy imagining better conditions. Instead, people focus on managing the one they have. Bedding is adjusted, fire is fed, bodies cluster closer, complaints fade because they offer nothing in return. This mindset does not come from optimism, it comes from experience. A detail you would only notice after many nights stands out now. No one exaggerates hardship here. Stories told by the fire do not dwell on suffering. They move past it quickly, treating cold and hunger as facts rather than injustices. What matters is how people responded, not how miserable it felt in the moment. The physical remains of winter settlements make this attitude visible. Tools show careful maintenance rather than overuse. Structures show repair rather than collapse. Nothing suggests reckless bravado. Everything points to restraint and patience. Endurance is built through preservation, not sacrifice. You feel this restraint in your own movements. You do not toss and turn dramatically. You shift only when necessary. You conserve warmth by staying still, by trusting layers and bodies and fire to do their work. Sleep comes not as escape, but as a continuation of the same careful balance practiced all day. There is room for more than one interpretation of this approach. Some might view it as grim acceptance. Others see quiet confidence. The truth likely sits somewhere between, shaped by the individuals and circumstance. What matters is that it works. Your breath slows again. The longhouse hums softly. Outside, winter remains as harsh as ever, but inside nothing feels urgent. The night does not demand courage. It asks for consistency. You rest within that understanding, letting go of any expectation that survival must feel dramatic. Here it feels ordinary, and that ordinariness is what keeps you alive. As the night stretches on, you begin to feel how memory settles into this place. Not memory as stories told aloud, but memory held in habits, in the way bodies move without thinking, in the shape of the longhouse itself. Sleep here is never just about rest. It carries continuity. You lie where countless others have lain before you. The bench beneath your back holds shallow impressions that no amount of smoothing has erased. Wood remembers weight. Over years, over generations, it takes on a shape that fits human bodies better than it ever did when it was first cut. This is not craftsmanship alone. It is use. The longhouse carries these traces everywhere. Smoke darkens beams gradually, layer by layer. Footpaths wear into packed earth. Door thresholds smooth under repeated crossing. None of this is intentional preservation. It happens because life continues here season after season, without pause. You sense how sleep becomes part of that continuity. By resting here, you take your place inside a pattern that existed long before you arrived and will continue after you leave. This realization feels oddly calming. Your night is not isolated. It is one link in a long chain of nights shaped by the same needs and responses. A quiet detail reveals this best. When someone wakes briefly and adjusts a blanket or feeds the fire, they do it the same way others did before them. The motion feels inherited rather than invented. No one explains it. It simply feels right. The material record supports this feeling of continuity. Longhouses were rebuilt repeatedly on the same sites, sometimes directly atop older structures. New walls rose where old ones stood. Fires burned in familiar places. The layout persisted even as materials changed. Place mattered. There is room to question how consciously people thought about this sense of inheritance. Some likely felt it strongly. Others may have noticed it only dimly, if at all. What matters is that behaviour carried memory forward regardless of awareness. Habit does not require reflection to endure. You feel yourself soften into that habit now. Sleep comes easier when you stop treating the night as something to conquer and start accepting it as something shared across time. The Longhouse does not care who you are individually. It supports whoever lies within it as long as they follow its rhythms. Outside, winter continues its slow cycle. Storms pass, snow deepens, then melts. Inside, the pattern remains. Fire, breath, rest, repair, repeat. You close your eyes again, aware that this sleep connects you to something larger than a single night. Memory settles around you like another layer of warmth, thin but steady, carried forward not by words but by repetition. The night has done its work on you now, not all at once, but gradually in the same patient way winter does everything here. Your body feels heavy in a calm, settled way. Muscles no longer resist the bench. Breath moves easily beneath layers of wool and fur. The Longhouse has stopped feeling like a place you are inside and started feeling like something that holds you. You notice how little effort it takes now to remain still. Earlier in the night you adjusted constantly, chasing warmth and comfort. Now everything feels balanced enough. The fire has found its steady rhythm. Bodies have arranged themselves into a quiet harmony. Even the animals lie still halt, radiating without movement. This is the moment people here wait for, even if they never name it. The point where exhaustion finally outweighs awareness, where the night no longer feels long but complete. You have made it through another stretch of darkness and nothing urgent remains undone. The Longhouse seems to recognize this too. Sounds soften. The occasional crackle of embers feels distant. Wind presses less insistently against the walls, or perhaps you simply no longer register it. Snow continues to fall or settle outside, but inside everything feels contained. You realize that sleep here is not a reward at the end of effort. It is part of the effort itself. Rest is how winter is survived. Without it, strength fades quickly. With it, even the hardest seasons can be endured. A small grounding detail returns your focus to the present. Your hand rests against the bench fingers, touching wood worn smooth by countless nights. The surface is warm now, heat soaked into it slowly over hours. That warmth feels earned, shared, passed along. There is no dramatic ending to this night. No final sound, no clear boundary where wakefulness disappears. Instead, consciousness loosens its grip little by little. Thoughts slow, images blur. The Longhouse continues its quiet watch without needing you to participate anymore. You let go of the effort to listen. You let go of the need to adjust. You trust the fire, you trust the walls, you trust the people around you to rise if needed, just as you would. And with that trust, sleep finally deepens fully, not as escape, but as belonging. As your rest settles into its deepest layer, everything begins to soften even more. The sounds around you stretch out, slower now, gentler. Breath moves in long, unhurried waves. Warmth stays where it needs to be. Nothing asks for your attention anymore. The Longhouse fades into sensation rather than place. You're aware of weight and heat, not shape or sound. Firelight becomes a distant glow behind closed eyes. Night no longer feels like time passing. It feels like stillness holding. You do not need to prepare for morning yet. That will come on its own, just as it always has. For now, there is only rest. Only the quiet assurance that you are sheltered, surrounded, and safe enough. If thoughts drift through, let them pass without following. Like smoke rising towards the roof, they can move on without effort. Your body knows what to do now. It has learned the rhythm of this place. Stay where you are. Breathe slowly. Let the warmth linger. Let the night finish what it started. The Longhouse remains steady. Winter waits outside. Inside, sleep holds you gently and nothing more is required. Sweet